Every year in America, more than 460,000 children go missing. 90% of hypothermia cases in children end tragically. But what happened in February 2019 in rural Pennsylvania defied every statistic. A 4-year-old boy vanished in 28-degree cold. Everyone lost hope. Everyone except his dog. What happened after 5 hours will change how you see animals forever. Michael Torres had been counting down to this visit for weeks. Her daughter, Patricia, was bringing little Michael to spend the long holiday weekend at the family farm in Lancaster County. Her husband, Robert, spent the week before clearing snow and fixing up the old red barn. They hadn't seen their grandson since Christmas. At 4, Michael was at that age where everything's an adventure. Patricia showed up just after lunch with Michael and Chester. The golden retriever and the boy were inseparable, had been since Michael was a baby. Patricia's husband had died of cancer when Michael was 2. She'd tell anyone who asked that Chester helped fill that hole in ways she never expected. The dog slept at the foot of Michael's bed, waited by the door during preschool, seemed to know exactly when the boy needed comfort. That first afternoon was perfect. Michael helped his grandfather feed the chickens, giggling when they pecked around his boots. Chester followed close behind, tail going non-stop, eyes locked on the little boy. The cold February wind whistled through the barn, but inside the farmhouse, hot chocolate warmed their hands. They sat around the kitchen table while Michael went on about his Valentine's Day party at school. Everything changed the next morning. Robert had driven into town for supplies. Patricia was helping Carol with lunch in the kitchen. The smell of homemade soup filled the air. Michael was playing in the living room with his toy trucks, Chester right there beside him like always. Carol checked on them at 11:15, both fine. The sound of Michael making engine noises, Chester's tail thumping against the hardwood floor. When Patricia went to call Michael for lunch 30 minutes later, silence greeted her. The living room was empty. The back door was wide open, cold air rushing in. Patricia's scream brought Carol running. They tore through the house, every closet, every room, calling his name over and over. Nothing. Chester was gone too. Should have been comforting, but it terrified Patricia instead. 28 degrees outside. Michael didn't have his coat. That little red jacket still hung on the hook by the door. Carol's hands shook as she dialed Robert. He left his shopping cart in the middle of the aisle and broke every speed limit getting home. By then, Carol had already called 911. Patricia was outside, her voice already going hoarse from screaming Michael's name into the winter wind. The farm sat on 87 acres. Woods on 3 sides, a creek running along the eastern edge. That creek was what Carol kept thinking about. Fast and cold with snowmelt in February, deep enough to... She couldn't finish the thought. Deputy Frank Morrison got there in 12 minutes. 23 years with the department. He'd worked missing child cases before. The questions came fast. Any arguments? Does Michael wander off? Was he upset about something? Patricia could barely get words out through her sobs. Michael was happy, well-adjusted considering he'd lost his father. Never wandered before, never disobeyed like this.
But here's what nobody wanted to say out loud. A 4-year-old's body can only survive 30 to 40 minutes in temperatures this low, maybe an hour if they find shelter. The clock was already ticking past that window. An hour later, the property was crawling with people. Neighbors, church folks, strangers who'd heard it on their scanners. They formed search lines, walked the fields, their voices calling Michael's name mixing with the sound of boots crunching through frozen snow. Temperature dropping fast, the sky turning that particular shade of gray that promises more cold. Patricia stood in the yard, wrapped in a blanket, shaking hard. "Chester's with him," she kept saying. "He won't let anything happen to Michael." Her breath came out in white clouds. Her fingers were numb, but she refused to go inside. Hours passed. Sun started going down. That small comfort felt hollow. A 4-year-old and a dog somewhere in the freezing cold. Every thought in Patricia's head got worse. Images she couldn't stop. Michael lying in the snow. Michael at the creek. Michael calling for her while she stood here useless. By 4 o'clock, state police showed up with thermal imaging equipment. Helicopter, too, the sound of rotors cutting through the air. But the pilot said visibility was going downhill with the cloud cover. Maybe an hour of decent daylight left. Canine unit was stuck in traffic from another call. Medical experts later would say that after 3 hours in this cold, a child Michael's size would be in severe hypothermia. After 4 hours, organ failure becomes likely. They were now approaching hour 5. Robert stood at the edge of his property, staring into the woods. The trees looked darker now, more menacing. "Should have fixed that door latch," he said, quiet. "Been sticking. He must have pushed it, and it swung open."
Carol put her hand on his shoulder. "We couldn't have known." Guilt doesn't care about logic. If your heart is racing right now like mine was when I first heard this story, hit that like button. Trust me, what happens next will bring tears to your eyes. And now, back to those critical minutes that would determine everything. 4:37. Deputy Morrison approached Patricia with the question nobody wanted asked. "Ma'am, we need to start considering the creek. I know that's not what you want to hear, but we need to be thorough." Patricia's knees went out. Carol caught her before she hit the frozen ground. The sound that came out of Patricia wasn't quite a scream. It was something more primal. The sound of a mother facing her worst nightmare. That's when they heard it. Faint at first, carried on the wind. Then louder, barking. Not frantic, not aggressive. Steady, insistent, rhythmic, coming from somewhere past the tree line to the north. Every head turned. The searchers froze mid-step. Morrison grabbed his radio. "Everyone, stop! Listen!" The barking kept going. Definitely Chester. That deep, determined bark Patricia knew so well. Morrison took off running toward the sound, Robert right behind him. Patricia tried to follow, but her legs wouldn't work. Carol held her daughter, both of them holding their breath. The only sounds now were boots crashing through underbrush and that steady barking growing louder. The search team crashed through the woods, following Chester's voice like a beacon. It led them deeper, past where the organized lines had reached. Rough terrain, fallen logs, dense brambles covered in ice. Not the kind of place a 4-year-old could navigate easily. The barking got closer. Then Morrison saw him. Chester standing guard in front of a massive fallen oak. The tree had come down years ago in a storm, leaving a hollow space where the roots tore free from the earth. The dog's golden coat was matted with ice. His body was positioned deliberately, protectively in front of that dark hollow. And there, tucked into that space, curled into a tiny ball, wrapped in what could only be described as Chester's own body heat, was Michael Torres. His lips were blue.
skin pale as the snow around him, not moving, but breathing. Morrison's hands trembled as he radioed for paramedics. "We found him. North Woods. He's alive. Repeat, he's alive." Robert dropped to his knees in the snow, carefully reaching into the hollow to pull his grandson out. His little fingers that had scattered chicken feed just yesterday were now stiff and unresponsive, but his chest was moving. Shallow breaths, but breaths. Chester pressed against the boy immediately, whining soft, a sound that seemed to say, "I did my best. I kept him warm. Please help him now." The paramedics arrived within minutes, crashing through the woods with their equipment. Warming blankets came out fast. IVs started. One of them checked Michael's temperature and his face went pale. "Core temp is 89 degrees. We need to move now." Severe hypothermia, the kind that stops hearts, the kind that most children don't survive. But Chester had found that hollow under the oak, the one spot on 87 acres with shelter from the wind. And he'd laid there for almost 5 hours, sharing every bit of warmth his body could give. The vet who examined Chester the next day would find that the dog had mild hypothermia himself. He'd given his warmth to the child first. At the hospital, doctors worked through the night to slowly, carefully raise Michael's body temperature. Too fast and his heart could stop. Too slow and the damage becomes permanent. Patricia never left his side, her hand on his small chest, feeling each breath like a miracle. Carol and Robert sat in the waiting room, Chester lying at their feet. The hospital had bent their no pets policy when they heard what the dog had done. The night stretched on, monitors beeped, nurses came and went. Patricia whispered stories to her unconscious son, stories about his father, stories about summer days to come, stories about Chester. Michael woke up at 8:17 that evening. His eyelids fluttered, those brown eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. Patricia was leaning over him instantly. "Baby? Michael?" First word out of his mouth, barely a whisper. "Chester?" "He's here, honey. Chester's here. He saved you, baby. He saved you." Doctors called it a miracle. 5 hours in 28-degree weather should have killed a child that small, should have been impossible. But the impossible had happened in those woods. Over the next few days, investigators pieced together what happened. Michael had seen a rabbit through that faulty back door. Being 4, he decided to follow it. Simple as that. Chester went after him immediately, the way he always did. When Michael got tired and cold and scared, Chester didn't panic. Somehow the dog found that hollow. Somehow he guided a terrified 4-year-old to the only shelter available on 87 acres of frozen farmland. And then Chester laid there for 5 hours, sharing his warmth, barking periodically, waiting for someone to hear him, never leaving, never giving up. Michael recovered completely. No frostbite, no lasting damage. Doctors couldn't explain it, called it extraordinary, called it divine intervention, called it luck. But here's the part that still gives Patricia chills, the part that makes her believe in things she can't explain. When Michael could finally talk about what happened, when the words came easier and the memories weren't so scary, he told them something none of the adults could explain. He said that when he got scared in the woods, when his legs got too tired to walk anymore, when the cold started making him sleepy, Chester barked, loud and insistent, wouldn't stop until Michael followed him. The dog led him to that hollow, step by step through the snow. Michael said he wanted to lie down, wanted to sleep in the snow. It looked soft, and he was so tired, but Chester wouldn't let him. Every time Michael tried to stop, the dog nudged him, pushed him with his nose, gentle but firm. Keep moving, just a little further. Chester knew, Mommy, Michael said, his small hand petting the dog's head. He knew where to go. He kept telling me this way, this way. I could hear him even though he wasn't talking. Does that sound weird? Patricia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, baby, that doesn't sound weird at all. The experts called it instinct. They said dogs have remarkable survival abilities. Chester simply found shelter, and the boy followed. Random chance, animal behavior. Nothing more.
But Patricia knows better. She's seen how Chester watches Michael, the way the dog seems to understand things that shouldn't be possible, the way he positions himself between Michael and any perceived danger, the way he knows, somehow just knows, when the boy needs him. That farm in Lancaster County looks the same as before. Red barn still standing, chickens still pecking around the yard, creek still running along the eastern edge, ice melting now with spring coming. But the Torres family sees it differently now. Robert fixed that door latch, then installed 3 more locks for good measure. Carol can't look at that tree line without whispering a prayer of thanks. And Patricia? She doesn't take a single moment with her son for granted. Every morning when Michael runs down the stairs for breakfast, every afternoon when he comes home from school, every night when she tucks him in, she remembers the day she almost lost him forever. Chester still sleeps at the foot of Michael's bed every night, still waits by the door when the boy's at school. But now, when people meet the golden retriever and comment on what a good dog he is, Patricia tells them the story, every detail, about the day her son disappeared into the freezing cold and the dog who refused to let him go. Because sometimes the deepest love doesn't need words. Sometimes it comes with 4 paws, a warm coat, and an unbreakable promise to protect the ones who need us most. Michael's 9 now, growing fast. Chester's getting gray around the muzzle, moving a little slower these days. But every February 14th, the family goes back to that farm. They walk out to that fallen oak together, all of them. Michael always brings an extra treat for Chester, their way of remembering. And every night, before Michael goes to sleep, he leans down and whispers in Chester's ear, "You saved my life, buddy." Every time Patricia hears those words, she remembers. Remembers the day the world almost lost her son. Remembers the 5 hours of hell. Remembers the sound of that barking cutting through the winter air like a miracle. But most of all, she remembers that love refused to give up. The lesson here isn't complicated. It's simply this: loyalty doesn't calculate odds or weigh probabilities. Love doesn't quit when things look impossible. Sometimes the heroes who save us are the ones who've been right there all along, asking for nothing except the chance to stay by our side. Real heroes sometimes walk on 4 legs. If this story touched your heart, leave 1 word in the comments: Chester. And please subscribe to our channel, because we have more true stories like this that deserve to be told. Stories about ordinary moments that become extraordinary. Stories about love that refuses to quit. Thank you for watching. And remember, the best friend you'll ever have might be the one who's been beside you all along, just waiting for their moment to show you what unconditional love really means.